This video is about user interfaces and their function. A user interface is the front screen of a piece of software that allows you to input commands. The function of a user interface is to allow interactivity between the user and the system, and this will facilitate the communication with the operating system and the applications. A well-designed user interface allows intuitive interaction between the user and the system. So when you're using the piece of software, it should just be almost obvious to you what you have to do in order to input the command that you want. So just using Microsoft Word here, I can see if I go up to Home, if I want to increase the size of this word here, then I can see the user interface makes it very obvious to me that I can increase it using this button here, or I can decrease it using this button here. So a good user interface is very intuitive between the user and the system. There are three different types of user interface that we need to be aware of. The first one is command line interface, or CLI. Then we've got graphical user interface, or GUI, or sometimes referred as a GUI. And thirdly, we've got natural language interface, or NLI. And we're going to look at each one of these in turn. So this is the command line interface on Windows, and you can see there's not a lot here basically, and I can type in commands here as long as I know the correct syntax or coding, and the computer will perform operations. So the first thing that I'm going to do is come off the U drive and go to the C drive. There we go, and then I'm going to command the computer to make a new folder in the C drive for me. There we go, and you'll see, there we go, the folder has been created. So that's the command line interface. Next we have a graphical user interface which creates a visual representation of commands. So when I'm using Word, I don't have to type in commands like I just did in the command line interface. I've got these nice visual representations here, so I can see that this makes it bold, I can see that this is changing the color. These are visuals to say increase the font, decrease the font, and there's lots of different visual representations of the commands in a graphical user interface. The icons have to be easy to understand, and this makes it more intuitive for the user. So let's look at what makes a good user interface or graphical user interface. So the first thing that we need to have is consistency. We need consistency of color, consistency of layout, and consistency of behaviors. So you can see here we have a consistency of color. Yep, we've got grays and whites with some pastel colors around the edge here. We have a consistency of layout, so you can see we've got a ribbon at the top which is linked to tabs on the toolbar, and if I open up another program, Excel, which is also made by Microsoft, you can see that there's consistency within these programs. So if I know how to use Word, I know how to use these similar elements in a different Microsoft program. The same is also true if we have a look at an Adobe package. So here's Photoshop, and you can see there's a consistency of color here. We've got grays and blacks, and if I have a look at another program by Adobe, which is Illustrator, you can see again there's some consistency. We've got the icons down the left hand side, some down the right hand side. We've got a toolbar at the top. Another feature of a good graphical user interface is its functionality. You need to be able to access the commands quickly and easily, and you can do that using these two interfaces. So I can quickly flick between if I'm typing text, if I'm drawing lines, if I'm moving things around, and the same in Word. If we go back to Word, I can do things very quickly. I can easily have access to the command to change this type into bold or underline it. The next feature of a good graphical user interface is easy navigation. And you can see here that there is easy navigation around here. I can just click on these menus here and I can navigate around the different features very easily. And when I go back to Excel, again, it's got the same type of ribbon, same type of navigation. That makes it really easy for me to go from command to command. The next thing is control elements, and we have lots of different control elements in these different pieces of software. So here's a control element here. If I want to change the size, I can select one from a drop down menu here, or I've got a drop down menu here. In Excel, we've got the same drop down menus and the same icon buttons, but we've also got here tick boxes. So tick boxes allow multiple inputs, and we've got what are essentially radio buttons here. So one view or the other, when I click on one it turns the other one off, whereas with a tick box, when I untick one it has no effect on the other. So I can have multiple options in tick boxes, but in a radio button it's either one or the other. If we go to Illustrator, you can see I've still got icon buttons here, which are essentially radio buttons because I can only have one or the other. I can't select multiple options at the same time. I've drawn a rectangle here. I've got a drop down menu that I can use to increase or decrease the stroke, and a drop down menu for the opacity. The opacity used to be a slider, so I'd slide it up and down or left to right based on how transparent I want it to be. They've changed that in Adobe CC to a drop down menu. But what I can also do here is scroll up and down as a control element now, using the wheel in the middle of the mouse to change the opacity. And that works the same for the stroke here, so I can scroll up or down using the wheel in the middle of the mouse. So that's another control element. Another feature of good graphical user interface is space and borders. So you can see on Illustrator here we've got a lot of free space around the side. This is good for the user as it doesn't make everything feel crowded. We've got space around the buttons. These icons aren't too close together. All of them have got some type of border around them. That just makes it easier for the user to understand, and it's not as cluttered. Another feature of a good graphical user interface is instructions. So I've got a search menu up here which will allow me to quickly find help and guidance on what I am doing. The same occurs within Microsoft. I have various different methods of gaining instructions. So if I click on the Microsoft Help here, then it will give me commands on how to use particular features. The final feature of good graphical user interface is accessibility. Those are for people who have particular needs. So it's easy to access this piece of software if I've got visual problems and I need enlarged font, because I can just use the commands here to either decrease or increase the size. And the same goes for Illustrator. If I've got a visual problem, I can quickly change the size of the document here if I really want to zoom in a lot. It makes it easy for me to zoom in, or I can use the shortcut commands of Control plus or Control minus. So a good graphical user interface makes it accessible to everybody. The third type of interface is a natural language interface, and this is like Siri on an iPhone. So this is a relatively new technology where you can use speech recognition to give commands using your voice rather than using visual icons or actually typing those in. So NLI, natural language interface, is generally on mobile devices, but is creeping into desktops and laptops where you can do voice recognition, voice to text. So the natural language interface comes from communicating with the computer using your voice.